Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. We're on hadith number 52. Hadith number 52. This is a chapter, Bab, Qawl al-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, ad-dinu nasiha. The statement of the Prophet alayhi salatu wa sallam that religion is nasiha. And nasiha is sometimes translated as advice, and sometimes translated as sincerity, and I'll explain why. So, عن جرير بن عبد الله البجلي رضي الله تعالى عنه قال بايعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم على إقام الصلاة وإيتاء الزكاة والنصح لكل مسلم. وعنه رضي الله تعالى عنه قال, or before that, the Prophet or Jarir says that he gave allegiance to the Prophet ﷺ to establish salah, to give zakah, and to provide advice to every Muslim. And again, I'll explain what exactly that means here in a minute. وعنه رضي الله تعالى عنه قال إني أتيت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قلت أبايعك على الإسلام فشرط علي والنصح لكل مسلم فبايعته على ذلك. The same companion says that he gave bay'ah, he gave allegiance to the Prophet ﷺ to be a Muslim, and the Prophet ﷺ made it a condition that he includes, that he also has he gives advice to every Muslim. So what is this word nasiha? What does it mean? The word nasiha originally would be used in two ways. One, they would say nasaha al-asal. Nasiha is done to asal, honey. Nasiha is done to honey. What does that mean? Well, I guess when honey, people who make honey or extract honey, whatever they're called, when they extract honey, that honey isn't 100% pure. It's mixed with things, whatever it is, either some from the honeycomb or whatever it is. There are foreign things in it, right? So the process of nasiha is a process of removing those things so that you're left with pure honey. So we know that honey has a lot of grades. You'll find very cheap honey, and you'll find honey that's extremely expensive. Why? Well, there's different qualities. So the process of nasiha is the process of removing things from the honey that isn't part of the honey, and what you're left with is pure honey, right? More valuable, tastier. The other use of the word was nasaha al-thawb. Nasiha would be done to a gown or clothing. So a tailor would do this. What does this mean exactly? When there's a rip in a gown, right, or it needs patching, part of it is ripped. Nasiha is when you tailor it. You fix it up. You patch it up. Right? So in this scenario, there's an incompletion, imperfection, right, that needs to be remedied. So nasiha is remedying that. So when we talk about the concept of nasiha, advice in Islam, it's important to understand the word and what it really means, how it was used. Why? Because when we say giving advice to a fellow Muslim, it's going to be one of two things. Either the fellow Muslim has certain things that they need to get rid of. Like the honey, it's mixed with certain things that is reducing its value. So nasiha is removing it so that you improve its value. Similarly, you might find a brother or a sister who they behave certain ways, they do certain things that it's not appropriate for a Muslim. So giving advice to them is a process of trying to get that out of them so that they become better. Or the Muslim, your brother or sister, they're not mixed with something inappropriate, but they're missing something from their life. For example, they pray their 5 daily prayers, but they don't pray sunnah prayers. There's something missing. They give zakah, but they don't give sadaqah. They're good, but there's something missing. So nasiha is giving them something new to complete them. Right? This is nasiha in Islam. So either way, whether you're trying to encourage them to stop doing something, or you're trying to encourage them to do something, the end goal and the intention is nasiha. You're trying to improve them. You're trying to make them better. Right? That's the goal here. So I think now we can understand why the Prophet ﷺ is telling Jarir you have to give advice to every Muslim. Now, there's a style of doing this. There's a way of doing it. There's a correct way, there's an incorrect way. So when you look at all the different narrations about bay'ah, allegiance, that the Prophet ﷺ took from people, or it's mentioned in the Quran as well in the 60th chapter, this isn't mentioned. Nasiha is not part of that. So it begs the question, why? Why is the Prophet ﷺ emphasizing it so much with Jarir? Well, potentially, Jarir has the style. He has that charisma. There are some people, when they come and they give you advice, you feel comfortable with it. You're okay with it. Like, I've seen people this way. They can go to anyone, even a random person, and advise them, but they do it in a way where the other person likes it. And there are some people, no matter how hard they try, they always get a negative reaction, right? So perhaps, maybe, this is why the Prophet ﷺ is emphasizing it specifically for Jarir, right? But the idea is, nasiha is an incredibly important part of Islam. And in another hadith, a more famous hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says, ad-dinu nasiha. Religion is about nasiha. That is your religiosity. They said, to who, ya Rasulullah? Then the Prophet said, to Allah, to his book, to the messenger, to the leaders of the Muslims, and to the common Muslim. 5 categories. Now we can understand what nasiha means, advising a fellow Muslim or a leader of the Muslim. We understand that. But how do you give advice to Allah?
Yeah, I was wondering.
How do you give advice to Allah's book, to the messenger? Here, this is when the scholars say, it's not about giving them advice, but rather performing nasiha on yourself for the sake of Allah. And this is why they would translate it as sincerity. Religion is sincerity. So if nasiha as a linguistic term means to purify or to tailor yourself, to make yourself better, then nasiha to Allah is purifying yourself for the sake of Allah. And this is precisely what the angel said. Right? وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ. That we purify ourselves for you. We do what we do for you. We worship you, and we pray, we do dhikr of you to purify ourselves because that's more pleasing to you. So this is nasiha to Allah. So what about nasiha for the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or to the book of Allah? What this means is you use the book of Allah as your means of purification. What is a pure person? When is a person pure? What's the definition of that? What is a good action? What is a bad action? We go to the Quran for that. So the Quran is our resource that we use for the purpose of purification. And one of the primary objectives of the Quran is to purify you. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, هُوَ الَّذِي أَرْسَلَ رَسُولَهُ بِالْهُدَى فَيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the messenger, he sent the book so that tazkiyah occurs. Purification occurs. You develop yourself in a way that makes you better, purer. That's what we mean by when we say purer, better. You're better. How you engage people is purer, meaning it's better, it's more rational. How you look at the world is purer, meaning it's better, it's rational. How you look at yourself is purer, meaning better, rational, more rational. Right? And that's a topic in of itself. But the idea here is the Prophet ﷺ is making this idea of nasiha equivalent to the religion. Like the religion this is the purpose of the religion, to make you better, right? And part of religiosity is providing that helping hand to other people, right? Helping somebody become better. And in this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ قَوْلًا مِمَّنْ دَعَا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا وَقَالَ إِنَّنِي مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. Who is better than the one who does good deeds and calls people to Islam and says that they are a Muslim, they are a believer? Who's better than this? Right? So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is praising everybody who gives da'wah, whether they're giving da'wah publicly to non-Muslims, or they're giving da'wah at the communal level to Muslims, or they're giving da'wah within their own home to their children. So every Muslim must be a da'i, everyone. Even if it's as exclusive as to your own spouse and your children. So we're all ambassadors of this faith. But once again, nasiha has a way. There's a certain way of doing it. And one of the principles when it comes to the idea of nasiha is that when you give nasiha, it doesn't end up doing more harm than good. There are some people, they're not ready to listen. And if you tell them, they get upset. Like once, we were doing salah. It was a smaller masjid. And there was this gentleman who was walking everywhere, walking. When it came time for salah, brought a chair and just put it there. So the imam says, you can't pray while sitting down while you can stand up. And the guy just got agitated. He's like, I won't pray right now. So the imam's like, okay, whatever. He realized this guy's not ready to listen. And if he continues to give him advice, what's going to happen? The man's not going to pray. There are people like this. Right? No, I'll do it my way or I'm not going to fast. I'll do it my way or I'm not. There's some people who are like that. So you don't want to end up doing more harm. Also, you need to think of the time. You might be a person who is willing to accept, or the person you're talking to is open-minded, but right now they're frustrated. They're agitated because of work. Something's bothering them. Now's not the time to give them advice. Wait until they're ready to hear it. And some people, they're okay to hearing advice, but they need to be ready. Like mentally, they need to be ready. But if you give them advice like randomly, and they're not prepared to hear advice, they have a negative reaction. So what do? You tell them, hey, I'd like to talk to you about something. When is a good time? You're getting them mentally prepared. Hey, I want to share something with you that it might bother you a little bit. Let me know when is a good time. So you mentally prepare them. People differ, right? People's different personalities are very different. The idea here is part of nasiha is the way it's given. There are correct times of giving it and there are incorrect times of giving it. There are certain things you should focus on, certain things you should overlook for now. Right? If somebody has never been practicing Islam, you're not going to throw everything on them at once. Let's start bit by bit by bit. And this is how the Prophet ﷺ, teaches us. When he sent Mu'adh ibn Jabal and he sent Ali ibn Abi Talib anhuma to Yemen, he told them, you're going to a place where it's people of the book, Jews and Christians. Call them to Islam. If they accept Islam, then teach them salah. When they start praying, tell them about zakah. When they give zakah, you see, it's just step by step. Right? And this is very important. A lot of people miss this. They want to throw everything all at once. No, it's bit by bit. Progress. Always see Islam as progress. What Allah wants of us is to be going forward. Right? Allahu Alam. So, ad-din an-nasiha. Religion is about giving advice. Now we enter the second unit of the book, Kitabul Ilm, the unit on knowledge. Now, ilm, knowledge is, as you know, an extremely important part of the faith. We Muslims do not believe in just you have to have faith. We don't believe in this. Rather, we believe that nothing happens, not an atom moves in this universe except that Allah's knowledge and His hikmah, His wisdom is behind it. This is what we believe. The challenge for us is whether or not we'll be able to realize what that knowledge and that hikmah is. Right? So, yes, the believer, part of Iman, is accepting that you're not going to know everything. That there are some things you simply cannot figure out, period. That for every if, there's a but, and for every and for every what, there's a what if. And I've given you all the example of the story of Musa and Khadir. Right? When he goes on the ship and he damages the ship. Why? To spare it from being taken. So Allah sent Khadir to damage the ship so that when he reaches the king, it's not taken from him. Okay, well, couldn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just have told Khadir to stop the man from going in the first place? Delay him and not damage the ship? You see what I mean here? Now, you can respond and say, well, when you look at the story of Musa and Khadir, how Allah describes the person or the people he was benefiting is actually different. The people of the ship or the owner of the ship, Allah did not describe that person. We didn't even know if they were a believer. But the parents of the child, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that وَكَانَ أَبَوَاهُ مُؤْمِنَيْن. They were believers. Not Muslimain, mu'minain. Like they're good believers. And then the third, the story of the wall and the treasure, what did Allah describe the father as? Salih, who was a righteous man. So there's a difference in the extent to which Allah protects a people based on their level of religiosity. So yeah, maybe Musa and Khadr, or Khadr could have delayed the ship from going, but that man has maybe some mistakes that need to be atoned for. So Allah preserves the ship, like He protects the ship from being taken, but there's a little bit of damage. It didn't come out in the best way, if you understand what I'm saying, right? But then you can go and say, what? There's always a what if. So yes, there is a point where we say Allah knows, but this idea of you just have to have faith and believe in things even though it doesn't make sense, no, we don't buy into this. So we Muslims, we have no problem with going to a verse in the Quran or a hadith of the Prophet and saying, wait a minute, this isn't making sense to me. Well, what about this? There's nothing wrong with asking questions. This is very Islamic. I mean, look at tafsir of Razi. Razi's tafsir is all about asking questions. Well, what this? How about this? How about... It's very normal, right? But the believer shines how? In that while they ask questions, they also remember Allah knows and I don't know, right? I might not be able to know, but what I do know is that Allah knows. And I'm comfortable with Allah. I trust Allah. So even if I'm never able to figure it out, what I have figured out is that Allah knows better, right? So knowledge is incredibly important in Islam, and there's so much virtue attributed to seeking knowledge and the people of knowledge, as some of these ahadith that are coming up will point out to. So Bab Fadl al-Ilm, the chapter on the virtue of knowledge. Knowledge and seeking knowledge is extremely virtuous. And this hadith says, عن أبي هريرة رضي الله تعالى عنه قال بينما رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم في مجلس يحدث القوم جاءه أعرابي فقال متى الساعة فمضى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يحدث فقال بعض القوم سمع ما قال فكره ما قال وقال بعضهم بل لم يسمع حتى إذا قضى حديثه قال أين أراه السائل عن الساعة. So here the Prophet ﷺ was sitting, and a man came to him, a Bedouin came to him and said, when is the hour? When is the day of judgment? Tell me when it is. So the Prophet ﷺ didn't respond. He continued to talk and say what he was saying before. So some of the companions said that the Prophet heard the question, but he disliked the question, so he ignored it. And others said, no, the Prophet didn't hear the question. When the Prophet finished saying what he was saying, the Prophet said, where is the person who asked the question about when is the hour? قال ها أنا يا رسول الله. So the man said, I'm here يا رسول الله. قال فإذا ضيعت الأمانة فانتظر الساعة. فقال كيف إضاعتها؟ قال إذا وسد الأمر إلى غير أهله فانتظر الساعة. So the man said, I'm here يا رسول الله. And the Prophet said, the hour will approach, will be near, when there is no trustworthiness. There's no trust. People don't trust each other, right? People don't trust each other. So the man asked, well, what happens? How is trust lost? And the Prophet said, and pay attention to this, he said, if responsibilities are given to people who cannot carry that responsibility. Mm-hmm. When responsibilities are given to people who cannot carry that responsibility. What does this mean? When you have a brain surgeon who's put as the Minister of Housing, what does this have to do with this? When the Texan governor or former Texan governor is made as the the energy minister of energy or whatever, what does he have to do with that? Right? When you have people who are just buffoons running the country, they can barely speak, right, in ways that make sense. What happens here? I don't trust you. Why should I trust you? So when people aren't in the proper positions, then what ends up happening is, well, how did they get to that position in the first place? Social networking, favors, donations. Like who is going to end up being the vice president? Like how did Kamala Harris become the vice president? Just because, Biden said, she seems like she's a qualified person? No, you'll find that there are people behind Kamala, whatever her name is, Kamala, yeah, who are big donors of Biden. So they'll say, hey, we'll donate this to you, Biden, if you make her the vice president.
We know.
Right? So this is how it is. And when you understand this is the system, how are you going to trust it? Now, I'm not saying don't work within the system. I don't believe in that. I believe that we still have there's still a lot we can do. A lot. But what I'm trying to say here is more of a human psychology. When I see people behaving irresponsibly and people who are in places they should not be, then it's all about just power and money, and there's no trust. Right? Take for example, let's just say the medical industry, physicians. Let's just say like people who clearly are not competent are becoming physicians. You're not gonna trust it. Insurance. Do you trust insurance? No.
Especially in medical.
Do you trust healthcare in America? No. It's all about money. It's not about you. There's no trust. When people are put into positions that they don't belong in, that is the loss. That is when trust is lost. Now the question is, what does this have to do with knowledge? And what does this have to do with the virtue of knowledge? Remember, Bukhari is teaching us something here. He's not a fool. He understands exactly what he's saying. So it's upon us to make the link. And perhaps what Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala is showing us is the following. When a person is put into a position that they don't belong in, they don't belong there because they're not experienced in it. They don't have the knowledge. A brain surgeon does not have the knowledge of the housing market. Right? A governor who's a career politician does not have knowledge of the energy industry. See what I mean here? Who would you like to be in, the minister of education? Who? Some random person, or somebody who's a senior pioneer, or has 30 years, 40 years experience in the education field. Would you be comfortable with such a person? Like if tomorrow Biden says the new minister of education is John Doe, and John Doe has been in the education industry for 40 years. He's worked as a teacher, he's worked as a principal, as a superintendent on the board of a school district. He's overlooked, you see what I mean here? He's been on the board of colleges. I mean, he's been all over the education. Would you be comfortable with such a person? You would. Well, clearly he has the knowledge. It's his place, right? So Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala is telling us that what it means for people to be in places they don't belong, what it means is they don't have the knowledge to be there. Conversely, when the Muslim community is educated, they are a community of knowledge, then you will find people who can fit those positions. And if trust is lost as a result of lack of knowledge, then trust is gained as a result of knowledge. Right? So here Bukhari isn't showing us how much hasanat there is in seeking knowledge. He's showing us that the social order is healthy and strong when education is healthy and strong. The stronger people are educated, the healthier society will be. Because we human beings are meant to be mindful people, right? Mindful species. We act according to knowledge, right? Why did the Western world make such huge technological gains? Because they used knowledge and information, right? Why have American Muslims been very successful in America? Because you all kept telling your children, go to school, get A's, go to school, it's meaningful, right? So knowledge is power, and therefore there's so much virtue in seeking knowledge. So much virtue in seeking knowledge. The social order depends on this being okay. But when the education system are just in chaos, in array, very weak, meh. This is why dictators will never invest a lot in the education system. Because the last thing they want is an educated population who can challenge the things they do and say, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense, right? Whereas in the West, here in America, I mean, nobody is left alone. Nobody's left alone. Every person is challenged. And that's very annoying and can be counterproductive sometimes. But in other cases, it's very important. It's very important. This is why the scholars say, never take a stand from one person. Take it from multiple people, right? So here, the virtue of knowledge is that when knowledge is emphasized in the Muslim community, the community is stronger, right? باب من رفع صوته بالعلم. The chapter of raising one's voice to disseminate knowledge, to share knowledge. عن عبد الله بن عمرو رضي الله تعالى عنهما قال تخلف النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم عنا في سفرة سافرناها فأدركنا وقد أرهقتنا الصلاة ونحن نتوضأ فجعلنا نمسح على أرجلنا فنادى بأعلى صوته ويل للأعقاب من النار مرتين أو ثلاثا. So here, Abdullah bin Amr رضي الله تعالى عنه said that we were traveling once and it was time for salah. And Abdullah said that we didn't have wudu. Him and a group of people didn't have wudu. And the Prophet started salah. And they want to pray with the Prophet. They didn't want to miss the jama'ah. So they went quickly and started making wudu very quickly. And in the process, they didn't fully wash their feet. So they went running to the salah, and the Prophet said, careful of your ankles. Your ankles will enter hellfire if they're not properly washed, right? So the Prophet said this in a loud voice. What is the purpose here? What is the point here? The point here is that it is not impolite to raise one's voice while giving knowledge. Like, we won't say that that's impolite. So for example, I know here in America, it's really, people don't like it, but in other parts of the world, when people give khutbah, they're shouting, right? They like it over there. Like, if you go to the Arab world and you're not shouting and doing this, people will say like why is he so calm? What's going on? But over here, it's the opposite. If somebody's loud and they're shouting and what's the deal with the sheikh? Why is he so crazy? It differs, but the idea is that raising one's voice in order to share knowledge is not to be seen as disrespectful or disrespectful to knowledge. It is a way. Next hadith, باب طرح الإمام المسألة على أصحابه ليختبر ما عنده من علم. This is a chapter of a teacher sharing or asking a question to their students or the people around to hear what they have to say. عن ابن عمر رضي الله تعالى عنهما قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن من الشجر شجرة لا يسقط ورقها وإنها مثل المسلم فحدثوني ما هي فوقع الناس في شجر البوادي. Here the Prophet ﷺ was sitting with a group of companions and he said there is a tree that its leaves don't ever fall, and it is an example of the believer. This tree, it represents a believer similar to this type of tree. So the Prophet asked them, what tree do you think it is? So this is the point, he is asking other people. Now, the Prophet ﷺ is the best disciplinary, and he is the best teacher, and he's the best parent. The best parenting skills come from the Prophet ﷺ. Here the Prophet is asking them a question. What is there to gain by doing this? Like, I've been with teachers who they won't ask you questions. They just say. That's their style, right? They just always teach. They don't want to hear from you. That was Imam Malik's style. Other teachers, no, they make it conversations. They want to hear from their students. Like Abu Hanifa. Abu Hanifa would sit in like a round table and he would say, here's a question. What do you all think? And he had Abu Yusuf, he had Muhammad, he had Zafar, what's his name, Zufar, and a fourth of his students, and they would just have conversations. They would go back and forth discussing, right? So there are different styles, but the Prophet ﷺ, he has the best style. When the parent asks their child a question, what do you think about this? It does a lot. Number one, it gets the child to think. You're getting the child used to thinking, right? Number two, it shows the child that you care about what they have to say. That what they have to say is important to you, to their parents. Number three, that you take them seriously. Number four, that they have a voice. And you can say something, you can speak. Number five, it builds personality. It builds personality in them. Hey, you have your own opinion. You're not just going to blindly follow me. You have your own opinion. This builds personality. Number six, it helps them have an opinion in the world. You know, a lot of Muslim parents, you know, they raise their kids with, don't say anything, what you say doesn't matter. And I'm your parent and you have to respect me, and if you ask questions, you're disrespecting me, right? Now, maybe that's okay in culture, but what ends up happening, or what could end up happening in the mind of a child, is that when they're out in the world and they're with their friends, they carry that attitude, that what I have to say doesn't matter, that my opinion is meaningless. And so now they're a follower, not a leader. And that's the last thing a parent wants in this country, for the child to be a follower of other people and not a leader, right? So this is the style. The Prophet ﷺ is telling them, hey, you know, what you have to say is interesting to me. That builds trust. So they started pointing to trees that are in the desert, around them, they're familiar with. And Abdullah says, وقع في نفسي أنها النخلة فاستحييت ثم قالوا حدثنا ما هي يا رسول الله قال هي النخلة. Abdullah ibn Umar, who was a young man at this time, he said that it came to my mind that the Prophet is referring to the palm tree. But he was too shy to say it. Why? Because there are elders around him. There are older people around him. So, you know, this is our culture. Till this day, this is our culture. If the elders are there, don't speak, right? Even Abdullah ibn Umar, he's probably in his 20s here. He's not like a child. So he was too shy to say anything. So they asked the Prophet, what is it, Ya Rasulullah? He said, the palm tree. The palm tree. Now, what we get from, in another narration, Abdullah tells his father, Umar, I knew what it was, but I was too shy to say. And Umar said, man, I wish you said it. I wish you had said it. Why? Because perhaps if you have said it, the Prophet would have made dua for you. Because you got the right answer. He would have made dua for you. So you missed that opportunity. In our religion, in the prophetic society, yes, we respect the elders. This is a big part of our religion. The Prophet ﷺ says, whoever isn't respectful to their elders is not part of us, right? But having opinion and having a voice from between elders is not disrespectful. If an elder has a position and a younger one says, no, I don't agree with that, that's not disrespect right there. It's not. Because the truth and what is correct does not play favorites with age or with gender or any of that. Right? It is about what is correct. Now there's a respectful way of presenting your opinions, and there's a disrespectful way. We're not talking about the disrespectful way. But somebody who respectfully voices their opinion in front of elders, in front of their parents, is not disrespectful. And Ibrahim ﷺ told his father, hey father, man, what are you doing? You're worshiping these idols, this is wrong. I'm afraid that the shaitan is going to take advantage of you. I'm afraid you're going to be in hellfire. Is that disrespectful? No. Right? So as parents, we need to be okay with our children asking questions and voicing their opinion. In fact, that should make us happy. I want my child to be an independent person, a leader, not a follower. That's what I want him to be. That's what I want the personality of my child to be, because that's what's going to make him stronger in society. I'm not here to raise a servant. I'm here to raise a leader who will lead his generation and the one after it. Right? So that's one. Now, what's the deal with the palm tree? Why is the palm tree like a believer? So there's a palm tree right outside. It's very beautiful. Look at it. What do you notice? What are some of the features of this palm tree?
It's very upright.
It's upright, right? It's upright. A believer is what? Upright in their akhlaq, in their morals and their ethics. What else? It stands high. It's tall. It's visible. A believer is meant to be visible, right? A believer is meant, like when you look, it's very easy to pinpoint who's a Muslim from a sea of non-Muslims. That's intentional, because you're meant to stand out, right? What else? The Prophet said its leaves never fall.
It's well nourished and always looks healthy. Its leaves are always green.
Yeah, it's always green, right? Despite the conditions, summer, winter, fall, it doesn't change based on season. Similarly, the believer doesn't change based on the situation, the circumstances of their life, right? Its leaves never fall. The believer is always doing good deeds. Look at how it's very symmetrical. It's very symmetrical. Whichever angle you're looking at it, you can go 360, it looks the same, all sides. And the believer is the same in all circumstances. They're not two-faced. They're not a person who, I'll do good here, and I won't do good there. Oh, if Allah gives me, I'll do good. If Allah doesn't give me, I'm not going to do good. That's not how they are. They're symmetrical. They are who they are everywhere. Right? What else? When the weather is tough, it doesn't break. I mean, you need incredibly powerful winds to break a palm tree. Incredibly. It'll go down, but it withstands and it just goes back up.
Actually, ours right now was raining, and with all the rain, the root just got too much water. And
Yeah, again, it can be broken, right?
it fell on neighbor's car.
But it's extremely rare for a palm tree to be broken by weather. What else? What grows on palm trees? Dates, very nutritious. But what's beautiful about dates is there's so many different kinds. And they're all nutritious, right? So there are many different kinds of believers, and they're always providing good for society, right? One way or another. Another thing is, everything in a palm tree is useful. Everything. You know that the bark that falls down, that you see on the roads on a windy day? They would use that as stuffing for their pillows. The pit of dates would be eaten by their horses. There is nothing in a palm tree except that it's useful. The leaf, they would remove the smaller sticks, and they would use that as a stick. Everything is useful. So a believer is always useful to other people, the people around them. And, I mean, last but not least, it's beautiful.
Very confident.
It's very beautiful. People will travel to be in a place where there's palm trees. And if you think of an exotic place, a palm tree is bound to be in that picture, right? So it's just beautiful. It's charismatic. That is how a believer is meant to be. So always remember, when you see a palm tree, alhamdulillah, we're full of palm trees, always remember, this is you. Right? This is another way of depicting you as a believer. So it's very beautiful. Wallahu ta'ala alam. We'll go ahead and stop there. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.